My parents demanded I postpone my wedding for 2 years so my sister could heal. Now she's marrying someone after 4 months, and the whole family expelled them for the hypocrisy. I'm 27 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to tell this story because basically, I just got married 2 months ago without my parents being there, and there are still people in my family who don't understand why all of this happened. The thing is, this didn't start with my wedding. I mean, that was just the final explosion of something that had been building since I can remember. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I was still a kid and already knew that my older sister, Isabel, was my parents' absolute favorite. I don't know exactly when I realized that, but it was early. Like at 6 or 7 years old, I already knew it. Isabel is 5 years older than me, and since I was born, she basically made my life impossible. And I don't mean normal sibling fights. You know, the typical nonsense of taking each other's clothes or fighting over the TV. No. She was genuinely cruel. She would hide my favorite things, tell me I was ugly and that nobody would ever love me. Once she even cut the hair off my favorite doll just because. And my parents? You know what they did? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. When I would cry and tell them what Isabel had done to me, it was always the same thing. That she didn't mean it, that she was stressed about school, that I was too sensitive, that I needed to learn to get along better with my older sister. Looking back, I should have seen it coming from there. Every one of Isabel's achievements was a huge celebration, like full party, guests, the whole drama. When she got good grades, special dinner at her favorite restaurant. When she won something at school, my parents posted it on Facebook with 1,000 photos and proud comments. I also got good grades, sometimes better than hers. And my parents would say, "Oh, that's good, honey. Very good." And that was it. Nothing else. Not even a photo. Isabel wanted piano lessons. They bought her a piano. I wanted painting classes. It was too expensive. Maybe next year. And next year never came. The thing is, I grew up knowing I was the second choice, the backup daughter, the one who was there because, well, the parents were already set up and decided to have another one. Don't get me wrong. It's not like my parents were abusive or anything that extreme. It's just that it was obvious. Absolutely obvious to anyone who knew us, that Isabel was their son, and I was like a cloud that sometimes blocked that sun. And the worst part is that Isabel knew it and used it against me constantly. If I complained about something she did to me, she would cry and say I was always making things up because I was jealous of her, and my parents believed her. They always believed her. In college, things got better a little because I basically moved to another city, got a partial scholarship and a part-time job, and only had to see them during breaks. That's where I met Ryan. In my sophomore year, he was studying engineering. I was in marketing. And we met at one of those horrible college parties where the music is too loud and nobody can talk properly. But somehow we connected, we started dating, and after 4 years together, he proposed to me. It was perfect, literally. He took me to that park where we had our first real date. There were lights and everything was beautiful. And I was crying from happiness because finally something in my life was completely mine. You know what I mean? Something that had nothing to do with Isabel or being the second choice. I called my parents the next day to tell them. You know, because even though our relationship wasn't the best, they're still my parents and I thought they would be happy. My mom answered, and when I told her Ryan had proposed to me, there was silence. A long silence. And then she said, "Oh, that's nice, Hannah. Congratulations." But she sounded weird. I asked her what was wrong, and she said nothing. It's just that you caught me at a bad time. We'll talk later. And she hung up. Literally, she hung up. I was standing there with the phone in my hand thinking, seriously? That's their reaction? But, well, I thought maybe I really had caught her at a bad time. I don't know. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. 2 days later, my dad called me, and basically he told me they needed to talk to me about the wedding. I thought they wanted to help with planning or something like that. But no. Turns out Isabel had just gotten divorced. Her 6-year marriage had ended like 2 months before, and she was devastated. Living with my parents again at 32 years old. And according to my dad, the news of my engagement had made her worse. I asked him why. I mean, what did one thing have to do with the other? And my dad told me it was obvious that seeing her younger sister getting married when she had just lost her marriage was painful for Isabel, that I should be more considerate, more empathetic about what she was going through. And then came the incredible part. My dad, with complete seriousness, told me that they and Isabel were asking me to postpone my wedding for 2 years. 2 full years. So that Isabel would have time to recover, to process her divorce, and hopefully find a new partner so she wouldn't feel so bad seeing her younger sister happily married. I swear to God, when he told me that, I thought he was joking. Like, I waited for him to laugh or say, "Nah, just kidding," but no. He was completely serious. I stayed quiet for a moment because I literally couldn't process what I had just heard, and he took advantage to keep talking, saying it would be best for the whole family, that 2 years went by fast, that Ryan and I were young and could wait, that family should support each other in difficult times. I told him no. Just like that. I told him I wasn't going to postpone my wedding 2 years because my sister got divorced, that I was very sorry for her, but my life didn't have to be put on pause because of that. My dad got angry, told me I was being selfish, that I had always been the problematic daughter, the one who never thought about others. I answered him that it was funny. He said that, considering my entire childhood had been ignored in favor of Isabel, and he got worse. He told me to stop playing the victim, that they had always treated us both the same, that I was ungrateful. We ended up yelling at each other, and he hung up, saying he hoped I would reconsider my decision because if I didn't, there would be consequences. Ryan was with me when that call happened, and he basically hugged me while I cried from rage and frustration. He told me I didn't have to give in, that this was our wedding and our life. But he also told me the decision was mine and that he would support me in whatever I decided. That made me love him even more. Honestly. But I already knew what I was going to do. I wasn't going to postpone anything. I had already spent 27 years being the second choice, the one who stepped aside, the one who sacrificed things for Isabel, and I wasn't going to do the same with my wedding. I decided to talk directly to Isabel before making any final decision, because, I wanted to be sure this really came from her and not just from my parents. I called her and asked her directly if she was asking me to postpone my wedding, and she, without any shame, told me yes. She told me she was going through the worst moment of her life, that seeing me happy and excited about my wedding was like a slap in the face, that if I really loved her and cared about her well-being, I would postpone the wedding until she was better. I asked her how long that was, and she said she didn't know. Maybe 2 years, maybe more. It depended on how she felt. I told her I was very sorry, but I wasn't going to do that. She started crying, called me selfish, cruel, told me I had always been a bad sister, that I had never been there for her. That made me laugh at how absurd it was. Her telling me I was a bad sister? The person who tormented me my entire childhood? I reminded her of all the times she had bullied me, all the times she had made my parents punish me for things she had done, and she basically said those were just kid things, that I needed to get over it, that she had already apologized for that. Spoiler, she had never apologized to me. Not once. I hung up that call, knowing exactly what was going to happen. I went ahead with the wedding planning. I booked the venue, the catering, the music, sent out the invitations. Of course, I invited my parents and Isabel, because even though I knew they probably wouldn't come, I still wanted to give them the opportunity. My mom called me when she received the invitation, crying, saying she couldn't believe I was being so insensitive. How was it possible that I was going ahead, knowing the pain I was causing my sister? I told her that Isabel was a 2-year-old adult, and it was time for her to stop treating her like she was a child who needed constant protection. My mom told me they weren't going to come to the wedding, that they couldn't support something that was hurting Isabel that way. I told them that was fine, that I respected their decision, but the wedding would go ahead with or without them. My dad sent me a text message 2 days later saying the same thing, that they wouldn't attend, that they hoped someday I would understand what I had done. I didn't respond. What was I going to say? Everything had already been said. The hardest part was when I had to decide who was going to walk me down the aisle. In an ideal world, it would have been my dad. Like tradition. But he had made it very clear he wouldn't be there. I thought about asking my favorite uncle, my mom's younger brother, but I felt that wasn't right either. In the end, I decided I would walk alone. Ryan told me I didn't have to do it, that he could wait for me halfway down the aisle or something, but I told him no, that I wanted to do it. Alone because, symbolically it made sense. I had raised myself emotionally alone, had paid for much of my college alone, had built my life alone, so why not walk alone toward my future? The wedding day came and it was beautiful. We got married in a gorgeous garden on the outskirts of the city. There were like 100 guests, many college friends, coworkers, some cousins and aunts and uncles from my side who did come. My Aunt Patricia, my dad's sister, asked me the day before where my parents were, and I had to explain the whole situation to her. She was in shock. Literally, mouth open. She told me she couldn't believe it. How was it possible that my parents would do something like that? I told her, well, that's my family. And she hugged me and told me she would be there, that many of us in the family would be there for me. When the time came to walk down the aisle, I'm not going to lie. My legs were shaking. All eyes were on me. The music was playing, and I was standing there at the beginning of the aisle completely alone. For a second, I thought about my parents, about how this was supposed to be one of the most important days in a daughter's life, and they had chosen not to be there. But then I saw Ryan at the end of the aisle, smiling with that smile that made me fall in love 4 years ago, and I knew I was doing the right thing. I walked slowly, trying not to cry, and when I got to him, he whispered in my ear that I looked beautiful and that he loved me. We got married surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported us, and it was perfect. At the reception, several of my aunts and uncles and cousins asked me about my parents. I was already tired of giving half explanations, so I told them everything. I told them about the demand to postpone the wedding 2 years, about the lifelong favoritism toward Isabel, about how they had chosen her feelings over my happiness once again. The reaction was immediate and, stronger than I expected. My aunt, Patricia, was furious. My uncle Roberto said that was completely unacceptable. Several cousins told me they had no idea the situation was that serious. Some admitted they had noticed some favoritism toward Isabel, but thought I was exaggerating or being sensitive. Turns out my cousin Carla, who's 2 years older than me, was planning her own wedding for 6 months later. She was there at my wedding with her fiancé, and when she found out the whole story, she came up to me near the end of the night and told me she had made a decision. She told me she was going to uninvite my parents from her wedding. I told her she didn't have to do that I didn't want to cause more problems. But she told me no, that what they had done was unforgivable, and she didn't want people like that at her special day. Apparently, several other cousins felt the same way, and basically my parents started being excluded from family events on that side. Ryan and I went on our honeymoon to Greece for 2 weeks. It was amazing, literally the best trip of my life. But when we got back and I turned on my phone after the flight, I had 20 missed calls and 30 text messages. Most were from my parents. The messages started relatively calm, like congratulations on your wedding, we hope you enjoyed hurting your sister, that kind of passive-aggressive stuff. But then they got progressively worse. My dad left me a voicemail yelling that because of me the family was treating them like pariahs, that Carla had uninvited them from her wedding, that several aunts and uncles had stopped talking to them, and that it was all my fault for airing our private business at my wedding. My mom sent me 15 messages saying I was selfish, ungrateful, that after everything they had done for me, this is how I repaid them, that they had spent so much money raising me and giving me a good life, and I couldn't even make this small sacrifice for my sister. I responded with one message telling her that postponing my wedding 2 years wasn't a small sacrifice, it was an absurd demand, and if the family was treating them differently, it was because their actions had consequences, not because I had said anything wrong, just the truth. She responded, saying I had always been dramatic and conflictive, and that I deserved to be left without family. That's when I decided to block them. I blocked their numbers, their social media, everything. I told Ryan what was happening, and he completely supported me, told me I had done the right thing by telling the truth, and if my parents couldn't see their own mistakes, that was their problem, not mine. But of course, blocking them wasn't enough. They started calling me from unknown numbers, sending me messages on Facebook from new accounts. My mom even asked one of her friends to contact me to say my parents wanted to talk to me. I told that lady, very politely, to please tell my parents to stop harassing me or I would take legal action. About 3 weeks after that, I got home from work and there was a bunch of boxes in the front yard of my house. Old cardboard boxes, some broken, with stuff inside. Ryan came out with me to see what it was, and when we opened the boxes, it was all my childhood stuff. My old toys, my books, clothes I had left at my parents' house, photos. Basically everything they still had of mine. Everything was thrown there. Some things wet because apparently it had rained the night before, other things broken. There was a note on top of one of the boxes that said, "Since you decided we're not your family, here are your things. Don't contact us again." Honestly, at that moment I didn't feel sadness or anything. I felt like a strange relief, like they had finally cut the last thread connecting us and I was truly free. Ryan helped me bring the boxes into the house. We went through everything, saved what could be saved, and threw away what was too damaged. I found photos of when I was a kid that I had never seen, like school photos that my parents never put in the living room, but they did put all of Isabel's. I found drawings I had made as a child, letters I had written to my mom on Mother's Day. It was bittersweet, honestly. And then, literally 2 weeks ago, I get a message from a distant cousin congratulating me because Isabel was getting married. I was like, what? Isabel is getting married? I go on Facebook on an old account I had that they hadn't blocked, and sure enough, yes, Isabel is engaged. To a guy she met like 4 months ago. 4 months. And they're already planning the wedding for 3 months from now. I mean, they're getting married 6 months after meeting, and basically 8 months after her divorce. Can you see the hypocrisy? They asked me to postpone my wedding with my boyfriend of 4 years for 2 years so Isabel could recover, but she can meet someone 4 months after getting divorced and get married 3 months after that, and it's perfectly fine. My cousins who know the whole story are just as outraged as I am. My cousin Carla called me specifically to tell me she couldn't believe the audacity, and that definitely my parents and she weren't invited to her wedding. That decision was more than confirmed now. The thing is, at this point, I don't even feel anger or pain about all this anymore. I feel more than anything a strange clarity. My whole life, I thought, maybe if I changed, if I was a better daughter, if I achieved more things, if I was more like Isabel, my parents would finally see me and value me. But the reality is, it had nothing to do with me. They had decided a long time ago that Isabel was their priority, and I was secondary, and nothing I did was going to change that. And once I understood that, really understood that, it was like taking a huge weight off my shoulders. Ryan and I are happy. We live in a small but nice apartment. We both have good jobs. We're thinking about adopting a dog next year. I have a relationship with several of my aunts and uncles and cousins who support me and genuinely care about me. I've started therapy. Not because I'm devastated or anything, but because I want to process all of this in a healthy way and not carry resentment for the rest of my life. My therapist told me something that stuck with me. That sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born with, and that it's okay to walk away from toxic relationships, even if they're your parents. I'm not going to say it doesn't hurt sometimes. There are moments when I see other people with their families, like in commercials or on social media, and I feel a pang of something. I don't know if it's envy or sadness or what, but then I remember everything I went through, everything I endured, and I know I made the right decision. My wedding was beautiful. I married the love of my life, and I did it on my own terms without sacrificing my happiness to please people who were never going to value me anyway. Last week, Ryan asked me if I would ever forgive my parents if they apologized. I told him the truth, that I didn't know. That it would depend on what kind of apology it was, if they really understood what they did wrong, or if they just wanted things to go back to normal without changing anything. He nodded and told me that whatever I decided, he would support me. And that's enough for now. I guess.